Metro Louisville is made up of 26 districts. This podcast gives you a chance to connect with your council member and learn about what's going down in your district.
Welcome back to the District Download Podcast. Today, we're back talking with Budget Committee Chair Rick Blackwell and Vice Chair Kevin Kramer to take a closer look into the capital and operating budgets for the fiscal year 2023 through 2024, which will begin on July the 1st. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Very good. And I'm Rachel Platt, and thank you all so much. We appreciate your all's being here. And you don't look too haggard, so it worked.
We made it through the process.
You made it through the process. So let's talk about that process, because the budget amendment, the highlights of that. First of all, money added, and let's talk about some of those projects that are now getting funded. And I guess one of the big ones is Goodwill.
Sure, yeah, the Goodwill Opportunity Campus. That's a project that Goodwill has raised a great deal of money. Like many projects these days, when you go to actually moving into construction phase, you realize that when you raised the total amount, or what you thought was pretty close to the total amount, in today's dollars, you did not raise the total amount, so there's that funding gap. And so it's a big opportunity. It's a big investment in the area to provide a lot of services, kind of wraparound services for the community. So yeah, very excited to be.
That Opportunity Campus in the West End. And in addition to that, also Goodwill's Another Way program got funding as well.
Again, actually increased the funding. It's a program that seems to work pretty well. We put it in last year, I think, as a pilot project.
2 years ago,
2
I think,
years
as
ago.
a pilot, and then last year we increased funding, and then this year we're
Increasing it again.
Let's talk about some of the other highlights of the budget amendment. A lot of money for infrastructure. And that's something, as we say, might not be the most glamorous, but everyday wear and tear on roadways. I care about that. Sidewalks, all of the above when it comes to infrastructure. Let's talk about the extra funding that went to that. So that's repaving, sidewalks, different things like that.
Right. So the paving has been a pretty significant concern for the council members. You know, we hear, not that administration doesn't hear the concerns, but we certainly get those phone calls, you know, when you have issues, when you have paving issues, when you have, you know, the whole paving schedule that we had, I guess, years ago when we decided to start adding more money to paving was based on an old calculation. I don't know if it ever worked, but it certainly hasn't worked in modern years of, you know, this paving is going to last a 20-year cycle, or, you know, if it's a side road, it might be 25-year cycle. No road is lasting. You know, we have heavier cars, we have heavier trucks, we have, you know, no road is lasting like that. So we've started looking at paving a little bit more often. And like you said, it's not really when you look at the number there and you look at paving, you're like, yeah, well, exciting, you know, paving, unless it's your road or it's a road that you travel often, in which case you're, yeah, that's good. Hopefully it's one of my roads that gets paved.
Where are we in the 10-year plan as far as upgrades to infrastructure?
Well, as far as road infrastructure, we're about 8 years in. We agreed about 8 years ago that if we would put $20 million a year, that they would be able to get the roads paved to a sufficient level. And then, of course, after that, it's still maintenance. I mean, you still have to continue to put into that road fund. To Councilman Blackwell's point, the original number was $20 million. Over the years, that number's gone up for a variety of different reasons. This year, the Public Works came across and said we need at least $30 million in order to keep on that same schedule. And so it was not a hard ask to move that number to $30 million. I remember when this whole thing started, it was like 8 years ago, and we got some departments where we give them money and they're overwhelmed with it. It's just they only have so much staff. There's only so much they can do. And so we asked Public Works, look, you know, you're asking for $20 million. If we give you $20 million, will you pave $20 million worth of roads? And, you know, I'll say his name, Jeff Brown, stood up in front of us with this look on his face like, oh my gosh, you're kidding me. And he said, yes, you give me $20 million, I'll spend it. And the next year he paved $20 million in roads, and he's done it every year since. And so this year it's a little bit more, but yeah, we're pretty excited about that. And that's just, you know, you talk about infrastructure, that's just roads. I shouldn't just, it's a big deal. That's roads. We did a study for sidewalks a couple years ago, and we realized that we're woefully behind on sidewalk maintenance. I think the mayor put $2 million in this year to to get some work, and then we added, again, it'll depend on how this unfolds, but we added a little bit more to that fund to try and catch up on sidewalks. Alleys is another one that every year we try to focus a bit on getting some money in alleys. I think the real exciting piece of this budget, when you talk about infrastructure, is what's happening in the parks. It's just, Councilman Blackwell and President Winkler did yeoman's work in this, and we're able to convince folks that if we're going to do deferred maintenance in the parks, we should do it based on a plan. And it shouldn't be my park needs this and your park needs that. It should be these are the parks that have the greatest need. This is where we can get the most bang for our buck. And we were able to get
that was $4.9 million in additional. So let's explain that just in case somebody who's listening doesn't. Okay, deferred maintenance. These are projects that have been put on hold for some reason because of funding. Now they're going to be funded. And this is
Correct.
What we kind of talked beforehand. Things that have been like kicking the can down the road. And now you get to the point where it's like, well, if we don't fix this stuff, we've got parks that are,
Right.
not in the best state. And that's why you said, enough, we've got to do this?
Right. Or you have community centers that no one will go to in the summertime because you don't have air conditioning or whatever it might be. So, it's those things. It's not projects in the sense of when people think of park projects, they often think about, adding a splash ground or adding a pool or whatever it might be. But this isn't adding. This is just going back and saying, okay, so what are the nuts and bolts kinds of things, again, infrastructure, air conditioning, roof, all those things that, you can say, well, yeah, we don't really have to do it this year because we don't have the money. We can always look at this next year and we can, put a bucket underneath that roof where it's leaking until you get where you have 14 buckets out because it's leaking so much, that's, so it's, it's one of those things that it is difficult to make the decision to spend the money on that because, it only leaks when it rains, so there's lots of days when it isn't leaking. So there's no real reason
on
to
those
do
rainy
that.
days.
Those rainy days, that's rough. Yeah. So it's to Councilman's point to get us to on the same page to say let's go with the plan. They spent a lot of time and effort to do the Parks for All plan. It came before us, and we agreed that this was how our vision for how we were going to do it in the future. But the real discipline comes when it's budget time and you say, okay, well, we are going to spend it, and here's the list of things that are going to be spent on, and maybe this year none of that's in your particular district. But over the years, the plan is going to touch every park in Louisville Metro.
So this is camaraderie. This is the parks, like you said, for all. So we're going to look at the big picture. We're going to put some of those personal things aside, and we're going to go because this is what's best for the entire community.
Exactly. And the 4.9 this year does these specific things, and then whatever the investment is next year is going to take, hopefully we can fully fund, we can't make a commitment to fully fund every year, but I hope that much like the maintenance that we're doing with the roads, that we decide, we're going to make that investment in Parks for All each year. And then, as I said, then every park gets their maintenance issues addressed in a cycle.
Right. And in addition to deferred maintenance, it looks like there are all sorts of improvements for different parks throughout the community as well, correct?
Sure.
So it's deferred maintenance and then additional monies for other projects too. Like I was looking at 1.5 for Jefferson Memorial Forest
Oh,
improvements.
right.
expansion,
Those
kinds of
are
things.
additional. Yes,
Additional,
we did have
yes.
some additional as well. The pools is additional.
I was going to say, so that has been in the news a lot lately. So let's talk about that. Additional funding increases funding by $3.1 million for Algonquin and Camp Taylor pools, because a lot of people have been questioning and wanting to know, we want our pools fixed, want to go. So this takes care of that.
It does, yeah. So it fully funds. It doesn't take care of it like there's no magic wand. It doesn't open up the pool tomorrow, but it is fully funded. So that's not the issue. Now
Right.
Now we've got to, get things moving and do this as quickly as we can. And the administration's been very clear and very public about this is a priority, and we're going to get them done. So got the money's there. Let's do it.
So did you all feel good overall with the amendments that were made?
Absolutely. And that just the last point on the parks, when you look through the entire budget and you see some of those park projects, some of those park projects are not out of the general budget per se. It's capital infrastructure funds. So you still have some council members who are saying, yeah, I do want to do this new thing in my park. And so they're using capital infrastructure funds to get that done. And in some cases, several council members get together and say, we're going to use our capital infrastructure funds in this particular park to make whatever improvements. So those are showing up in the budget as well.
So it's not either or. There's
No.
okay.
No.
So that's good to know.
Very grateful that we were able to.
So with this amendment,
Give
just to
different
go
amounts.
back to the totality, one of our last podcasts, we had talked about the budget was 1.1 billion, 3.5% increase. Public safety was a huge, lot of money for that with LMPD, different things for that. Did that stay pretty much intact? Do you all feel good about that as being one of the main focuses of the budget overall?
Yes to your first, and well, actually, yes to both. Yeah, it is. It did stay intact. We did some language changes that helped direct, and it's minor kinds of things. It's things that came up in our discussions, and the one is I forgot what they called that, the bumpers that
The push bumpers on
push
the front
bumpers on the front of so the new fleet, when they purchased a new fleet, we instructed them in the language to purchase these push bumpers on the police car, so that when a police officer comes and responds to an accident, that they, instead of waiting for a record, well, they'll still need to wait for a record, but instead of waiting for a record to open the street back up again, they can actually push the car out of the way.
Okay, get
and
traffic
then
moving more quickly.
Yes, and then the wrecker. And I know our constituents are going to love that.
I will say yes as one of them, being
Yeah.
stuck in traffic when that happens.
Right.
So
we're
we're like,
gonna-
why can't we just push that out of the way?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now they can. Or well, now some of them will be able to. This
Right.
is a pilot project, and we're doing it with a new car, so we'll see. I suspect it's going to be a very successful pilot, and we'll see all of our constituents kind of calling for that, and for even to retro for next year.
And I know one of the other things we talked about was homelessness and some of the initiatives for that. Did those pretty much stay intact as well? And were you pleased where we landed on that?
I would say all stayed intact, and actually we added. Goodwill offers this program called Another Way, where they take vans out and they go out and invite folks who are obviously homeless and struggling an opportunity to go and work for the day. And then with that opportunity to work, they also build some wraparound services, and it's been remarkably successful. So we added $2 million in the budget for that. We added money for another program to go outside of 264 to offer those same kinds of services. So quite a bit in there, actually.
Yeah. So there's, and the second one is it's a similar service, but its focus is on so the van with work. There's a certain segment of folks who are going to do that, and you can get them involved and then get the wraparound services around them based on that, their willingness to be a part of it and get a job and move on. But there is another group that leaves another group that job isn't going to be. That's not going to be the carrot. That's not going. So this is the second one, is trying to reach out to those folks who, another way isn't working, and offer even another way where we reach out just with the services, the wraparound services to begin with. And so it's about building the relationships with folks and trying to help them to understand where the services can be, or just bring in the services to you.
Let's talk about the totality of the budget, the process, how it was improved with council input, a lot of camaraderie. How would you all describe it as far as council input?
I think, well, I would like to think everyone feels really good about the fact that we had lots of opportunities for input. We had not only our budget members, committee members, who attended either in person or virtually just about every one of the hearings, but also we had I think a really good number of folks that weren't on the budget committee who attended as well. The virtual piece allows you to be able to do that a little bit easier. But so we have that. We did a lot of conversations with people along the way. The folks, and I got to do a shout out here for our finance people who help us with this, and by help I mean just do a ton of the work. It's one thing for me as chair to say, okay, so we're going to end this. It's been an hour. We're going to end our questions now. If you have any other questions, just send them to LaTanya Bell or Beth Stenberg, and then I leave. and the
here come the
questions go to them.
questions.
That's right. Or in the follow-up, they get all the follow-up back out. They put together. We ahead of time we ask all the agencies some of the most important questions that they see in analyzing the budget, and so we get all that information back, and we get that to, and by we I mean they get all that information to committee members and to council members if they want to have that information as well to ask the questions that need to be asked. So it's a ton of work, and they do a ton of work, and they are up very late, and they are late workers, and I'm an early worker, so they're up late. They're up late, and then back up early in the morning with me shooting questions or having Zoom calls. Last week we had Zoom calls at 8 o'clock or something.
It was 8 o'clock where you were?
It was 8 o'clock where I was, 9 o'clock here.
Well, I'm glad they got shout outs for that. Let's talk a little bit about the process to get to where we are today over the past 2 months. Hearing process and public participation. Want to touch on that at all?
Well, we changed the hearing process. Well, I shouldn't say we. The new chair changed the hearing process. Well, I guess I can say
you were
we.
accurate. Yeah, it was.
When he came in, there were some questions about what if we did this a little differently. And so a couple changes. The biggest one, I think, is in the past we've allowed each department to come in and do a presentation, and then we would ask questions. Well, if they were scheduled for an hour, 45 minutes would be their presentation, and then we'd have 15 minutes for questions. So this year we said, look, we know who you are. We know what you do. All the questions were sent to you ahead of time. You've answered them. Really what we should be doing is asking follow-up questions. If you didn't answer the question as completely as we had hoped, or if you misunderstood what the question was, we have follow-up questions, or sometimes your answers create questions for us. That's really where we wanted to spend our time. And by making that change, it was really, really useful.
So a little streamlined is what we...
I would say.
It was, yeah. I would say, maybe even more, just more focus. So you're focused on what we're there for. It is a budget hearing, and there's a temptation for council members when you've got somebody sitting in front of you and they're in charge. You got public works sitting in front of you, and you're frustrated because you've got potholes that haven't been fixed. There is a temptation for you to ask the question about your potholes that haven't been fixed, rather than the bigger question of how much money are we putting in the budget to fix potholes that aren't getting fixed. So, I think it helped keep us focused a little bit more, and then it's our job as the chairs to, if you do go down that road, to help you stay focused on this is a budget
So
question.
that's something you'll keep going forward. You feel like that process this year worked?
I feel like it did. We'll hear feedback from our colleagues and see if they thought so as well. I mean, the end result was pretty good, I think, and so we'll see. And who knows? Who knows who's sitting in these seats next year? So I might not be chairing. So if I'm the chair, I would say, yeah, that's what we're going to do again. If I'm not the chair, the next person will. Person up makes those calls.
Let's talk about discussions that took place establishing priorities and working towards the final amendment. How did that all play out?
So we did several things. We as our caucus work. So the Republican caucus, Democrat caucus, we did some work with using our caucus leadership to help kind of frame priorities. What are the things that we going into it? What are the things that are concerns for us? What are things that, before we even see the numbers, what are things that we know are going to be a concern for us? Public safety is going to be a concern for us. So when the numbers come over, if the numbers are low for public safety, that's going to be an issue.
Right.
Continuing with the paving plan that we put in, the 10-year paving plan that we put in place, that's obviously a concern for us going in. If the numbers aren't there, we're going to make a correction. So we do that in caucus and come up with what are kind of general things, general concerns, and then that's where we also surface what are issues that you're seeing in your own district, because you're the closest one to your district. So what are the things that you're getting phone calls on? What are the things that you would like to see happen? And so we got those lists as well. We shared those lists with the administration before the budget was finalized. So some of the things we're able to, I mean, frankly, they probably had those things already in the budget, and they're like, "Oh, good! I'm glad they asked for that." Here it is. Some of them, I'm sure they made some adjustments too before it came over to us, and then as we went through the process and the hearing process, all the questions that came through, and then we have. Well, we did two things. We we got a lot of the information just in terms of just, sending the questions, sending concerns straight to us. And then we also have a wall where people can put suggestions of things that we need to do and areas that we need to improve on. So
All right. And
lots of requests for input.
oh, I'm sure. It sounds like it. And then I've seen that the mayor has been very supportive, seems like happy on that end as well. So good marriage there as far as.
In fairness, I'll speak for me. I think I'd speak for others as well. We were very happy with our first meetings with the mayor. It was not long after he was elected. He as he was looking at the budget, he invited us over in a couple different groups. And when I sat down to meet with him, he was not very far into the conversation, and I started to smile a little bit, and he got deeper in, and the smile got bigger. And at one point, I actually moved a little bit in my chair, and he turned to look like, are you laughing at me? And one of my colleagues said, "Mr. Mayor, he's not laughing at you. You just made him one of the happiest guys in town, because the things that you're saying you want to include in the budget are the kinds of things that he's been talking about for the last 5 years." So, when you talk about roads and you talk about infrastructure and you talk about deferred maintenance, I feel like that's a drum that some of us have been beating for a very, very long time. And, previously that drum wasn't heard very well. And, in my first meeting with him to talk about the budget, Mayor Greenberg pointed out that we can't just keep putting these things off, that we have to take care of this. And so, if that's where you start, right? If you start in this place where the mayor already is starting to say the kinds of things that so many of us on this side of the street have been saying for a long time now, it makes that budget process a lot easier. And I will point out just real quick, you mentioned adding. I want to brag on the fact that we didn't add any expense in this budget at all. I've been involved with the budget for a number of years, and it's not uncommon that the mayor presents a budget with an amount of borrowing, and it comes over to our side of the street, and council members want to add other projects, and so we borrow more than the mayor proposed. This budget does not borrow any more money than what the mayor originally proposed. So all of the additional spending is actually possible because we were able to cut things in other places. And again, credit to the mayor when we would call and say, look, we're thinking you got this in there, and we think this might be something we'd rather do. He was able to say, well, don't do quite what you're thinking there, because this is important, but I can understand if you need to move this much money from this place to another place.
There's some negotiation when it comes to that.
I would say not even negotiation. I would say collaboration.
Yeah.
It was an opportunity. It was just, talk it through. If you've got an issue, if we need to move things, let's talk. Let's talk about it.
Seem to be on the same page for the most part.
I think
from what you're saying.
It felt to me like that from the very beginning, honestly.
And I'll say something else too, that it was I think exciting for all the council members. So, you get questions about, so where does this revenue come from? If that's the case, and I would add one other piece that Councilman forgot, but I know he is excited about this piece. It's one of the other things that we said was, if revenue comes in higher than projected, which it may very well do, that we are committed to putting money back in to even make the debt that we are taking on less. So that's kind of our priority. So not only are we not raising it, we're hoping that we will actually borrow less than what the mayor originally proposed, which is, I think, long-term healthy.
We've talked about adding. In order, not everybody gets everything that they want. So let's talk about things that perhaps didn't make it into the budget. Okay, I'm the realist in the room, apparently. Is there anything that didn't make it in that you wish had, or?
I don't think we've funded sidewalks as much as we would have liked. But the sidewalk list is long. So, I don't know how much money, actually there is a dollar amount, but it's insurmountable. So the money we put there is going to make a difference. It's just, if you had more.
If you had more, you would do more.
Yes, ma'am.
When it comes to sidewalks. Anything for you?
No, I think, there's way more need than what you have money for. So it's always, people talk about that, the budget being your moral document. It's where you decide to put your money is what is really important to you as a community. And I think this reflects our community values. So no, I don't think so. I mean, I think, to Councilman's point, if you had more money, yeah, we could do even more for the deferred maintenance in parks. I mean, it would be awesome to say, the number that they're giving us for the first year is 4.9 million. We met that, and then we decided, you know what, all right, we're going to add, another $4 million. To Councilman's point earlier, though, you would probably say to parks, can you spend 8.9? And they would say, no, not in 1 year. I mean, that would be a crazy ask to go from a culture where you aren't used to doing deferred maintenance to saying, okay, we'll spend $10 million in deferred maintenance. That would be very difficult, I think. So the 4.9, they'll spend that and come back with the good news, and then next year we'll work on what's the next installment in Parks for All.
Let's talk about overall process. Did it feel similar to years past? Did this feel different? Better, worse, the same?
Actually, Councilman probably be a better one to answer that question because I've been away from the budget committee for a couple of years, and so it was a different process for me for sure. I had to kind of gear back up.
So your thoughts?
In many ways, it's the same. I mean, the process works pretty well. The mayor presents a budget. We do the budget hearings, ask lots of questions, circulate back and forth with our individual caucuses where we are, and then come to a point where we negotiate. So in that regard, it was somewhat similar. But there was definitely a difference this year and past years. Councilman Blackwell and I have known each other for a long time before this. I always got along very well with Councilman Hollander. So in that regard, it's not so much about the relationship as much as it is it's just a difference in the way that you handle things. I think the other thing that really was different was we knew going in that we were going to move some of the mayor's money around, and we knew that was going to be a piece of it. The mayor was collaborating with us, and so we had a sense from the beginning that we weren't going to have a fight over how much money or fighting over where that would have to go. It was just a matter of figuring out how to do that. So that piece felt a little different. I think the real difference, and it would have been more so for Councilman Blackwell than myself, we've got 8 new members on the Metro Council. And that makes a difference.
Oh, I'm sure.
It makes a difference in how people are paying attention. It makes a difference in how quickly they're grasping. I mean, $1.1 billion, this is the biggest budget we've been involved in, but that's a big number. And so if you're brand new to the council, that's a lot.
Intimidating.
It is.
It's a really big
It really is. It really is. And so again, credit to Councilman Blackwell and President Winkler for being able to get out and communicate with so many new members to help them understand, this is kind of what it looks like. So for me, it was, this is the way we do things, but not for everybody.
Yeah, I think the collaboration piece was really important, and and I expect that I will continue on with administration. Because example of that, we're looking for how we're going to spend money, and how we fund our priorities, and then the administration reaches back out and says, hey, we make, well, let me back up. So we try not to raise the expected revenue in a budget, because then you're spending money that the mayor doesn't think is there. And so then if we had to come up short, who's that on? That's on us. Right. So we try really hard not to do that. I won't say we have never done that, but we try hard not to do that. It's a bad practice. So in this case, though, the administration came back and said, hey, we know end of year, the close of the books, we're really close to the close of books here, and we know that we're going to have X amount left over from this year that we can carry over, and we believe that our revenue projections, you come in as a new mayor, it's quick. You come in and you're right into a budget.
Yeah.
So going through the process, they looked like, I think our revenue projections are low too, and so we feel very comfortable with this being another like $6 million or something. We'd feel very comfortable. Three, maybe 3.5 from this year, and then another to make it a total of 6. Not every administration has done that in the past,
right?
Because that's $6 million that you could hold on to, and then you could use those priorities or set those priorities as you went. We've had that oftentimes where we will come back and say, hey, we got extra revenue. We want to spend it on this, this, and this. So again, it just reemphasizes the collaboration between administration and the council.
Just a
It's been
couple
awesome.
more questions. I'm sure as long as you've done it, each year you learn new lessons.
Sure.
What was the biggest lesson this year for each of you?
We changed the format a little bit, as Councilman mentioned a minute ago, that, we went from where the agency would give kind of an overview of the answers to the questions that we already asked you, and you had them in your packet in front of you. If I had it to do over again, I probably would have done an introduction, certainly with the budget members and maybe with the full council, of, here are the changes. We did talk about here are the changes, but I probably, if I had it to do over again, would have spent a little bit more time with that.
Walk them through it a little more,
Yeah,
maybe?
yeah. Here are the changes, and here are the reasons why we're doing that. We did talk about, we won't get straight into the questions, but I might have even had our, looking at last year's questions. I might even given them a packet from last year's and said, okay, look, here's everything that we ask them, and here are the answers that they have. So, especially for our new folks, moving forward, here's what your expectation is. You've read this ahead of time, and in any questions, you've asked your questions in in the margins, and then you're ready to shoot from minute one those questions out. So, I think I could have done that. I think I could have done that better, and would probably do that better next year.
Wanted to ask you all each, we've talked big picture, but let's get specific. Is there something in the budget, a community-wide project that you would like people to know more about, something you were able to support that you really are proud of, or anything along those lines that you would like to highlight?
Yeah, I think both. I don't want to put words in Councilman's mouth here, but I'm going to. I mean, I think both of us are very proud of the funding the Parks for All and having the discipline to stick with that, even though there might not be something in there for your particular park, or you've got something that you feel like the air conditioners. I've got an air conditioner in my community center too, and it's only going to make it one more year. Okay, it's on the list for next year, so it'll work. So I think having that vision, using that vision, agreeing on that vision, and then carrying that out. I think I'm proud of that. Specifically in my district, I'm proud of. We are going to pave what we think is the last gravel road that the city owns in Metro. So
You said that earlier before we started
believe that.
recording. I mean, so that's incredible.
Yes. So
And you?
I would reiterate, I think the work that was done with Parks for All is great. I'm glad we were able to make that happen. I would point out that when we look at the way that different council members use their funds, historically the Republican caucus has pooled their capital infrastructure funds, and we've identified projects that as a caucus we felt like were important. We did that again this year, and a lot of the money that was spent out of those CIF funds was money in parks. So not only are we seeing the deferred maintenance being taken care of with Parks for All, which again we think is great and support totally, we still felt like there were things that need to be done in some parks in our areas. And so we used our capital infrastructure funds to do that. So, to Councilman Blackwell's point, if there's someone who says, hey, I have a community center who has an air conditioner that needs to be fixed, I don't want to wait. There are capital infrastructure funds that individual council members can use to do those kinds of things. That's a real challenge. You got 26 different council people with different needs in their different districts. And so it's challenging when it comes time to figure out how to use those capital dollars. And do you fix a road? Do you fix a sidewalk? Do you fix an air conditioner in a park? And as is true with so many other things, and I'm not advocating for more money in CIF, but $100,000 in one specific district, it's not enough to do all of the different infrastructure that needs to be done. And so that's assuming you were spending it exclusively on infrastructure.
Final question I had, and something you said earlier that I want to come back to because I really liked it. You said the budget kind of reflects who we are, our values, all of those things. When you look at the totality of this budget, where does that put us? Who does this budget say we are?
yeah, I think it says that we're a community that values safety. So we are going to put the funds in because everybody should be able to live in everyone's neighborhood ought to be safe. And when we can have those debates and agree or disagree on, so what does that mean and where do we spend those? But safety is one. I think we hear very clearly from our constituents that green spaces and parks are really important, and we hear that having a city that when you have not only for our getting to work and getting back home and in the street in front of my house, but also when we bring in guests, having a city that looks like we care about the infrastructure is really important. And at the same time, then we have a huge investment in affordable housing. We have a huge investment in trying to come up with and not just come up with, not just have a study, but a huge investment in homeless issues and trying to address those issues, wraparound services and trying to do the best that we can for all of the people in our community. And then the investment is really it's an investment both inside of Waterston, outside of Waterston. It reflects that we believe that that the whole community is important, and we need to invest in the whole community.
Final word from you?
Oh, I don't think I could say it any better.
Thank you all for all the hard work and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As always, thank you for joining us, Rachel, and a big thank you, Councilman Blackwell and Councilman Kramer, for leading the council through this year's budget process and all the hard work and extra time you devoted to creating a balanced budget. The District Download will be back on July the 11th for a discussion with our interim police chief. Until next time.